So, I'd like to welcome you all to this morning talk at Sysav. We're talking about circular textiles today with our guest, Ellen Lindblad, textile expert from Sysav, and Karis Eganwire, senior lecturer in marketing, specializing in consumer behavior. Right?
Yes.
Just to collect it all, we'll be talking about fast fashion and how it leads towards a behavior of more frequent purchases, and also the amount of waste it generates, and how we can how we can work with that. How can we also change consumer behavior, and how can this have a real effect rather than a fringe effect? And I will leave you with a more, well, just say a few words about yourself and your work, so we can have that as a presentation. I will leave it first to Ellen, and then we'll go over to Karis.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I work at Sysav, which is a municipal waste company in the south of Sweden. So basically all the waste here in the south of Sweden comes to us for treatment or incineration. And I worked with textiles for 8 years, I think. I had almost just started at Sysav, and then I was at a conference and heard someone mention textile sorting and automation. I was like, yes, I want in on that. And so we started with the Ziptex project, and then we just kept going, and now we have the whole facility at our place in Malmö. So now it's another story, working more with the market.
Could you explain a little bit about what Ziptex is, what it does? And
Yeah, Ziptex is the world's first industrial-sized automated sorting facility for second-hand clothing. So basically today all clothing that are collected by the charities goes abroad and are collected manually. But it's hard to manually sort in this enough pace, enough volumes, and to that enough quality to actually be used in fiber to fiber recycling. So it's mostly mechanical recycling where we shred it, we use it for rags or stuffing materials in car seats. And that is where Ziptex comes in. Our machine can sort big volumes of textiles fast, and it can do it with a very high quality. So you can come to us with a specification and say, we want at least 95% cotton, and we can sort that. While just feeling at a garment is very hard to say, oh, this is 60% polyester and 20% cotton, and then it's 2% elastane. You can't do that. But the
so
machine can.
if you get like huge bundles of cloth,
Yep.
of textiles,
Yep.
you can sort it out in like a variety of materials afterwards that are like cloth worthy. You can do clothes out of them afterwards, right?
Yeah, with the right technology. I mean, that is one of the issues we're having, or not issues, but it's a challenge, because we knew when going into this project that the market and the technology is not really mature yet, so we won't get a profit right away. But if we can't have volumes and the qualities that's good enough, you can't develop the recycling technologies either.
So basically, you're ahead of the market right now.
A little bit, yeah. But it's coming along, and we do absolutely sell textile fiber to like chemical recyclers. And so there are fiber to fiber going on, but yeah, it is a developing
Are there
market.
clothing companies that are using your textiles already?
There was a lot of clothing companies involved in the project. I can't say exactly who the customers are right now, partly because I can't, and partly because it's secret.
I was like gonna say that we're not public service here. You can say the name.
Yeah.
But
Sorry.
If you do, you have to kill us.
I think it's online, so there's a lot of people to kill.
Damn it.
But yeah.
But so the standard of today is that textiles are bundled away abroad,
Yes.
where they get like the economies of scales of it, so they can sort it in some way.
Yeah,
In
they
Sweden,
sort in
we don't
like,
have that
we don't
capability
have, no.
besides Ziptex.
We don't have any manual sorting here, and
Right.
that is the other challenge that we have. It sounds weird since we collect a lot of textiles, but our main challenge right now is to get textiles to sort, because everything collected here, they take out some cream, as they call it, like the best stuff for the shops, but the rest is exported, because it's abroad that these big manual sorters are, and they sort in 200 to 300 different categories depending on quality, market, you name it. But then we have to buy it back if we want that
Mm.
that material, which of course is environmentally just wrong and also expensive. So we want to find material here.
Mm.
And we have some sources here, and we're happy that we're in Malmö, which is close to Denmark, which is a bit further ahead than us when it comes to collection.
Because the image of ourselves here in Sweden is usually that we're far ahead in everything that has to do anything with recycling or anything that's ecological or green or organic.
Yeah, it depends on what you compare with.
All right.
But yeah, there is a mandatory separate collection of textiles coming in 2025.
Mm.
That is 2 years away, and Sweden has not even said how we're going to do it. So we have no time basically to implement it unless they tell us now, which they're not. So there's been a lot of frustration, and everyone is waiting here on the market. Like, should we start something? Should we not? Who is going to collect? Who is going to own the material? Will there be an EPR scheme, like extended producer responsibility, or what will it be? Well, in Denmark, they're actually implementing this already this summer with separate collection. So their amounts and their volumes will increase soon, hopefully.
Well, let's get back to that in a
Yeah.
little bit. But Karis, give us an idea of your research, because I imagine when we buy back cloth from abroad to do recycled material, turns expensive, has an impact on who affords who can afford to buy those pieces of clothes afterwards.
Yeah, so I am, as you said, a researcher with a special interest in consumer culture, consumer society. And so that means I look at the ways that we consume, not only kind of how we consume rationally, the things we consume, but all the kind of irrational reasons to do with status and identity and creating relationships that are involved when we consume things. So when it comes to clothes, obviously there's a lot of that involved. What we buy, what we wear, it is about communicating with the world, who we are, what we stand for, and that kind of thing. So yeah, there's a lot about status and things going on there. I'm especially interested in kind of anti-consumption and sustainable consumption, those kind of trends that we started to see in society that we live in at the moment. But I'm also kind of focused on the fact that we put a lot of responsibility on the consumer. So we expect that consumers will all make the right choices. We put that responsibility on them. And what we see oftentimes is that doing the right thing, making sustainable choice, comes with a big cost for consumers, be that financial or in terms of the time they have to spend to kind of do the right thing. It can often be more costly to them to make good choices. So there's a lot of kind of systemic problems, which I think we're going to touch on.
In that cost,
probably
you
today.
mean also like how engaged you are in finding
Yeah, right. So if you
finding
want
stuff.
to, yeah, if you want to buy clothes or wear clothes that are sustainable, you can't just simply go to H&M and pick something up, and you can't just even take the 5 minutes it takes to look at the label and try to figure out, okay, this is recycled, or this is reused, or this is something, because manufacturers and retailers make that kind of quite complicated. They don't want it to be super transparent, because they want you to buy stuff, right? So the amount of time you have to put in to understand what's involved, to understand the whole supply chain and the whole system that's involved with recycling and sustainable textiles it's a big cost for consumers.
But, I mean, with an increasing interest in recycled clothes and being more climate conscious, wouldn't it be a win for the companies as well to advertise it, make it more accessible and easier to find that kind of clothing?
Sure. Yes and no.
Oh yeah.
Well, as Ellen's kind of indicated, it can be really expensive to do that. We don't have a global supply system that's set up to make these things easy for corporations, either. It's not only consumers that struggle with making the right choices. To do something really sustainable is costly and it takes time, if it's even possible at all. And consumers want cheap clothes, corporations want to make money. So we're all stuck in this kind of systemic problem where we can't necessarily, any of us, do the right thing within the constraints that we have. So expecting yeah, people to just choose right is I think a bit problematic.
Oh yeah. Can't there be like a Tesla maneuver over this? That you start off with the expensive sports car that's aimed at targeted at a group that is affluent, and after that you will be able to generate more a wider array of products at a more accessible price.
I think we're going a bit towards that. I mean, there's coming like garments that are part recycled materials, usually a very small part, and then you can keep it pretty cheap. But now I've seen, I don't know, remember which company it was, but they had some entirely recycled shirt or training pants or whatever it was. But it was super expensive. So of course that is a niche market. But I guess organic cotton was more expensive before. Now it's more mainstream and easy to find. But then again, it can be hard to find enough organic cotton to make enough clothes.
How big of an environmental problem are we talking about here? How much cloth are we throwing away? Like
Huge.
huge.
Yeah.
I
How
think,
big is the proportion that we
yeah.
actually get to save in some way?
Clothes stand for like, I think it's the fourth most climate impacting category
Oh, wow.
amongst all, like housing, and then I think it's more than transportation. But we buy like the most recent number I saw is 14 kilos of clothes per person per year in the EU, and of that, 60% roughly is thrown into the household waste for incineration. Even though half of it could be reused and the rest probably be recycled. So there is a lot of waste going on. I mean, we buy too much, obviously, since we have to throw so much away. I think the clothing purchases went down a bit during the pandemic, but on the other hand, the household textiles went up.
Oh, yeah.
So
Everybody started knitting though. Wasn't that a good thing?
Yeah. Is it a good thing? Making stuff that maybe someone wants. Isn't it like
Depends
kids'
how
crafts?
good you become
it's so
at
pretty,
knitting.
but yeah, well, it's gonna be thrown out.
I think something that is really nice when people kind of engage with making their own clothes,
Yeah,
though,
it is.
It gives them a real insight in how much work is involved in making a garment, because we're so used to these days, you just walk into any shop and something costs 50 crowns, and so you have no respect for that item, really. You have no concept of what work has gone into to make it, the water that was consumed, the land resources, the chemical pollution, all the, and the human labor that's gone into that.
I would love a system where you could actually put money on, I mean, it's been talked about before, but like ecosystemic services and like the environmental impact, put money on it and actually pay what it costs. I often say that, my husband likes, this is so cheap. I'm like, is it really? Have you thought about the environmental cost?
Yeah, because the price is not the cost.
Yeah, that is, it's an interesting thought.
But with the current technology and with Siptex that you have, could you technically solve all problems in Sweden? Could you, if you would get all the material all the waste material, all the textile waste material that we generate in a year in Sweden, could you handle it?
We can sort like 20,000 tons per year if we went on maximum capacity, like working day and night. And if we see to the amount of collected textiles in Sweden today, if you took away all the reuse and only had the recycled part left, yes, we could basically sort all of that. But that is before the separate collection in 2025. So hopefully the amounts will increase.
Explain a little bit about that, the separate collection.
Yeah. It's basically we just have to, like we do with food waste, like we do with paper, plastics, we will have to have a category for textiles in some way.
And that would be something legally binding from the EU that would be imposed on us as well.
All
and we
EU
have to
countries will have to do this.
And we don't exactly know how it's going to be written yet, because it's not written yet.
Yeah. There will come, I think, something in the new waste directives from the EU that's coming now. I think we're going to see it this summer. I think they will write something about an EPR scheme. But
what's EPR?
Extended producer responsibility, like we have on plastics and paper, etc. So we'll see what they write, and if Sweden hops onto that, and if the municipalities will collect the textiles, or if their producers will do that too.
Can I ask, does that mean that whoever kind of made and sold these clothes, the retailers that sold them, then have to contribute financially to their disposal
They
or
are
use?
in charge of actually collecting it and disposing
wow.
of it. Then if they do it themselves, put up their own like organization for it, or if they pay someone else to do it, that we
So
don't
they
know.
might,
But
all
there
the
are
retailers in Sweden might, for example, pay SIP tax to Sysav to
someone to
take care of
collect
this.
it and then sort it and dispose it. Yeah,
Interesting.
if it's
What effects do
good.
you see from this coming to a consumer? I hear just higher prices, but is there more to it?
Yeah, I mean, there could be some higher
Mm.
prices, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, that we consume a little bit less clothing at a
Yes.
little higher price. No big, that's not a big problem for the environment, at least. Yeah, I guess there becomes a little extra work
Mm.
on the consumer. They now have to sort their clothes. But I think in general positive, because if we have a system for this, that's much better. At the moment, I know myself and a lot of my friends, we'd like to know better how we should dispose of clothes. Where should we take them?
Mm.
Um,
I get that question so much. Like I want
yeah,
to. I have
exactly.
this like worn out shirt. What should I do with it?
Yeah.
Mm.
Because whole and clean, we know that we can give
Yeah.
it to charities, but what to do with the rest? And I never have a good answer because we don't have a national system for it.
Exactly.
Depends on where you are and who you have around you.
Exactly.
Is that a strictly is that a political issue, or can companies drive the development here, or can consumers drive the development here? For me, it sounds like something that you can lobby about.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, a lot of shops they have collection of reused
Mm.
or old clothes, and then you get this little voucher to buy new
Oh,
clothes.
so there's some goodwill also to be had somewhere around there.
Yeah,
They
I'm
kind of
very
use this-
skeptical.
Yeah, me
I'm
too.
very skeptical. I think these are not very transparent kind of chains of how this happens, but what seems to be the case is those clothes are collected. People believe that they're recycled in some way. They aren't. They're sent to West African countries or East Asian countries where they are essentially dumped. And the consumer then feels like, oh, I've done something great. My clothes have gone back into this circular economy, so I can buy new ones now, guilt-free, no problem. So I think a lot of those schemes perpetuate this problem, and I think putting it in the hands of corporations, you risk that that's always going to be the case. They're going to do what's cheapest, easiest, and will increase profits, which isn't necessarily what's best for the planet
That's also
or people.
interesting. I mean, those clothes they go to a sorting facility in Europe, but yes, a lot of the textiles then is exported to, for example, Africa. But now they're also talking on an EU level to not make it so easy to export textiles outside of the EU. And that will, like, what are we going to do with it? Then we really have to develop these recycling technologies like fiber to fiber, make new garments out of old garments because we can't make rags. How many rags do we really need and what can we do with it? It's like a parallel. My colleague often do this with the kids. Like if you were in an apartment and you couldn't go out with the trash, what would you do? What would you do? And they're like, oh, I'm gonna squeeze it out the mailbox, and like, you can't do that. Well, then you have to like pull on the tap. You have to stop buying so much because what you take in, if you can't get it out, what are you gonna do with it? And the earth is like our big apartment where we all live, and Europe can be our apartment. And then we have to take care of our own waste and how we're gonna do that.
Yeah, that's a great analogy, I think. Because when it's on your doorstep, you're really confronted with the mess we're making and the waste we're generating.
And now you say, as you say, it's easy. You donate to a charity or to a store, and then it's okay to buy new things. Even secondhand can be like, okay, then it's okay. I can buy as much as I want to because it's secondhand. Even though we don't have that strong of a culture in Sweden, we're really good at donating to charity, not so good at buying secondhand. So that's why.
Isn't now the time to say that we're all wearing secondhand clothes? Though?
Yes.
2/3 of us. I asked you before. Yeah, can I pose that question? Like, what kind of clothes are you wearing? So 2/3 of us are wearing secondhand. One of us is just wearing like really old clothes.
That's also good.
I was like, yeah, I got to find something this morning because I was thinking about it. Like, yeah, these are like 20 years old.
Oh, that's okay. That's
if not circular, then it's like
A really, really,
War-
really long
worn
line.
and torn.
It's sustainable. I mean, that's the most
Yeah,
sustainable thing we can
somewhere
do.
after 10 years, it's got to be sustainable, right?
Yeah,
Mm.
I think so.
So we're in also secondhand and recycling. Where do you, what helps most, and is one a door opener for the other? How do you see it?
Good question. I mean, I'm not an expert in textiles, but from my perspective, I would imagine it's got to be better to wear secondhand clothes than recycled textile, because purely for the fact that there's much less energy involved in sorting, remaking, retransporting all those clothes. So that's where I focus.
Though there's a
my
higher
energies.
demand on like the quality of the clothing that you use on a secondhand shelf, like that you take from a secondhand shelf.
Yeah,
If it's torn to bits and,
yeah, of
and
course.
got stains on it.
Of course. But I think that there is enough clothing that is of a decent quality, probably still, that many more of us could be wearing secondhand or pre-loved clothes, as I like to call them, because that sounds much nicer. There's enough clothing already that many of us could be doing that more than we are now, and it wouldn't have any kind of serious impact on the supply, I don't think. So I think that. But you maybe have a more scientific answer to the question.
No, not really, but of course, reuse is always better than recycling. I mean, recycling clothing, I see, is the last way out. We're a waste treatment company. That's why we focus on this. But the best thing we can do, don't buy it. Buy it secondhand. Use it for a really long time. Basically, those two are the same thing. Just if you use it for 20 years, or if you use it for 10 and you for 10, doesn't matter, but keep it in the loop. It costs a lot of energy, as you said, to recycle, especially with these chemical recycling processes that we see coming up. It's energy, it takes a lot of energy and effort. And yeah, that's way out.
What took Sysav into the area of like of Siptex, say of
Me.
that was you.
Yeah,
Wow.
basically, it was just, I heard that at the conference, someone talking about it. I wanted in. We joined the project, and it's a 3-step rocket, those kind of research projects that was. So we joined in step 2 when we had a pilot facility up in Avesta. And then we saw that it worked, and I started lobbying at Sysav that Malmö is a really good place for this.
So where do you see yourself going in, like, say, 10 years from now?
Right now, I see that we have to meet the challenges that we have ahead of us, which is we have to solve the feedstock problem. How can we get the textiles and see what happens 2025? That can have a big effect. And also, I see that we need to somehow, it's not really our business, but the polyester recycling processes needs to be better, because polyesters are like 60% of all clothes are polyester or something similar, fossil based. And the demand for that on the secondhand fiber market is not that great, and the processes are not really there
So
yet.
different materials are like more or less easy to take care of.
Yes. Everyone wants cotton.
All right.
So 95% cotton, sell it right away. It's a good price.
What about wool? Isn't wool a thing anymore?
Yeah. I mean, like Italy is really good on secondhand wool. And we can also sort it, of course, but the market here isn't.
You said Italy.
Yeah. I know they've done it for years and years and years. So
Are there any companies that are like ahead of the curve?
Actually, don't know. Like, you mean retailers?
Yes. In the
There's a lot
meantime,
of talk.
I'll just point out that for our listeners or our viewers, you can write down questions on the chat, and we'll be bringing them up by the end of the discussion here.
I don't know any retailers that are like, I mean, a lot of retailers now, they have some garments with part recycled, organic. They have some take back schemes, mending schemes, but not like all out recycled, for example.
Yeah, and I think the trouble is there are companies that kind of put themselves out there and say we're making, for example, underwear from 100% recycled plastic bottles and so on. But as a consumer, it's very hard to wade through these claims.
Yeah.
Like, and for every claim you hear some kind of horror story. Now I read somewhere that some companies, not this company, but some companies are now kind of producing plastic bottles to then break down to make their clothes out of, because they're not getting the right quality or the right
And
so
then
they
they can call it recyclable.
exactly.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And I think
Is that really being done?
yeah, I heard. I don't have facts
I've heard
on
it too.
Yeah.
But
Because
also, I mean, the pets, it's actually like everyone wants the old bottles now.
Mm.
I mean, can we find something else, please?
Yeah, so I think from a consumer perspective, like wading through these claims is really hard work. And each time that you invest a lot of thought and energy and time in trying to make a good decision, which is then kind of negated when you hear one of these stories, is well, actually that wasn't the right decision, because it really drains your motivation. And in the end, people think, well, you know, what is the point? I'll just say, you know, take what it says on the label. Don't ask too many questions, because then I can feel good inside and feel like I've done the right thing.
But I thought you were in on it before, that it's kind of unfair to put the emphasis on the individual consumer. But I mean, say the state is a pretty big consumer as well. Say for uniforms, for the police, for the army, for hospitals.
Public procurement is huge. Can have a huge impact.
Could that be the way to like open the dams and go from small scale to big scale?
I think it's an interesting idea, but I think you still have almost the same problem. At the end of the day, there is some poor person wading through these public procurements and trying to make the best decisions in a supply chain that's not transparent, where they have to rely on the claims of the companies selling these goods that are largely, you know, not independently checked. I fall more on the side of that we make legal requirements around this. You know, and I think the EU is doing a good job here. It might not be as fast as I would like, but I think they're moving in the right direction and making rules, regulations that's going to apply to everyone. So you have this kind of more level playing field for all organisations, and that kind of hopefully reduces the motivation for companies to greenwash. Right? It's not just about that they're going to put a label on this and someone's going to buy it. They actually have to follow the rules, otherwise they're going to be fines or other kind of consequences, which I think is.
Do you expect an instant effect after 2025 when this legislation passes?
Not that legislation only, but the textile strategy came from the EU last year. And for example, labeling is mentioned there, that it is a jungle and you don't know, it's washed out because you don't know what it means. So that is one thing. And they also mention like passports for clothes, where you can track and trace, and you have like a QR code or something. It's not done how it's going to look like, but that way you could actually follow the garment and see what's in it, what chemicals are in it, what materials are in it. And that could be kind of revolutionary for the sorting businesses.
Is that kind of close to you mentioned earlier your master students? Could you say something about that? How that works?
So it's a company called Maddie who are working with just that. I'm not a very technical person, so I can't give you all of those technical details, but they might be watching, so they can probably give more details. But they're working with exactly that, so that they'll develop technology which helps both retailers or brands and consumers to kind of engage with these passports that are going to be in the clothing and kind of get information from them, so that consumers will be able to kind of understand, what should I do with this garment when it's finished its life with me? What, you know, how can it go forward, whether that be waste or reselling or so they can probably tell you more about that. But I think those kind of developments will be really interesting, and as these kind of regulations come in, how different almost small industries pop up to enable this technology to work in a good way will be really, really interesting.
Yeah, I think so too. Definitely.
And how can I, as an individual, influence this in a way besides buying clothes from recycled materials or secondhand? How can I play a small part in this development?
I mean, I think the last 40 years or so has shown us that simply buying the right things or trying to buy the right things is not working. Since the 1980s, 1990s, we've been responsibilizing consumers to shop us out of climate crisis and supply chain abuses and so on. And we're not there. That's not working. The empirics show that it doesn't work. So I think as an individual, the most important thing you can do is vote. Vote for politicians and lawmakers who are going to enforce this and do it from the other end, not from the bottom up. That's my personal perspective.
I agree. It is hard. I mean, you can buy responsibly or buy nothing, but yeah, well, we're just small drops in a really big ocean. And I'm not saying that it doesn't matter what we as individuals do, but the politicians, the really big companies, they have the power here, and we need legislation. I think so too. It won't come from the industries or from us personally. We need legislation.
But also, we're talking about us lowering or diminishing the amount of consumption that we're into, but also we're importing the materials from countries in the other side of the world where people are depending on their income from producing cottons and stuff like that. What are their incentives to be more to work with us in this recycling world? Are there any?
I mean, I think that what we've seen over the last 40, 50 years as global supply chains have developed is that people who are supply what the businesses and corporations are demanding. And so I think, yes, it can be problematic and the process of change can be difficult for sure, but I think eventually they will adapt to what is demanded. So if we have legislation that requires we produce things in a certain way, or that we use textiles that are recycled, or then the supply chains will adapt sooner or later.
Yeah, I hear that question sometimes as well. Like, if we stop exporting our old used textiles, what will they do? Well, the problem is we're actually drowning them in our old waste. I mean, China, they put a plastic ban like years and years ago. We exported a lot of used plastics there. Now they don't want it. It's waste. And the same, there are bans on importing textiles in a lot of African countries now, because it drowns the local market and doesn't work. So I think also it might sound harsh in some way, but yeah, we will adapt, and we can't go on as we are today. So we have to change, both us and them and all of us.
Once again, I fall back to the self-image of Sweden being so far ahead in this. What other countries are influential and doing a good job at this?
Depends on what part of the value chain. I mean, Denmark, for example, they've always been better at collection than us. But then other countries might be further along when it comes to recycling. And I know Lithuania and Germany, they're really good at sorting, manual sorting. But that is partly, I mean, one reason we don't have manual sorting here in Sweden is because the labor cost is too high. You need a lot of people to sort if you're going to sort in 200-300 different categories. And it won't work here. We can't compete with them in the same way. So we have to find other ways to compete. And automation is one way. Which I think will come more and more here.
But what do the Danes do that we can't do?
I don't know, nothing really.
They're so close here.
Yeah, I don't know really why they have always had higher collection rates than we have. Yeah, it's strange. I mean, we have a strong culture around our charities here as well, as do they. I can't give you a straight answer there.
I'll just throw in, we got a shout out here from a person called Clara Consedian. She says, thank you. It's so useful information for her. She's working on a project to make a sustainable fashion website. So she's happy about this. And we got a question also, I think. What is the responsibility of the manufacturers to contribute with awareness of consumers and encourage behavior change?
Good question.
I think take back information could come in the label of the products. Is that so?
I mean, I think this is a tricky question because you have kind of two parts to it. What do you think the responsibility of the consumer of the producer should be, and how will that really play out in reality? And I think, of course, producers have a huge responsibility, right? They are, as you said before, the price that's on this clothing, these textiles, is not the cost. Like the planet and a bunch of people in different places are paying the price for this product that the producer is benefiting from, the consumer is benefiting from. So yes, I think huge responsibility needs to be placed on producers. But the reality is, if we allow producers to take the responsibility and don't enforce that or don't force them to do it, then I just think we end up where we are now, where we've got these kind of voluntary schemes, take back schemes that kind of disguise a lot of bad stuff going on behind the scenes. So yes, responsibility lies with the producers, I think, but we can't just allow them to take responsibility.
No,
we have to force responsibility on them.
Yeah. I think so too, and one part of that is also like design for recycling. That is also something they we need to. I think.
But is that a demand that can be created from the companies, or is that a demand that comes from the demand side and is put on the companies?
I would want to say yes, but I don't think we are enough people willing to pay and have enough knowledge to actually put that demand. I would want it to be not easy to buy the right thing. It would be impossible to buy the wrong thing. And there the supplier side must take that responsibility and only have good stuff on the shelf, because you can't put that responsibility on the consumer. It's impossible to know all this.
And I perhaps should add as well, like I sound like I'm really, thinking that producers or retailers are the bad guys here. I understand that they're also part of a system where they are obliged to make profits for their shareholders. That is how the system works. Like we've set up an economic system where we reward essentially doing stuff that's bad for the planet and stuff that is short-termist and stuff that doesn't think about the future. So it's not, just, retailers or producers, you should be better. We need to change the system so that it is not financially rewarding to do the wrong thing. And it
the
is.
best would be if none of us existed at all. That would be the best for the planet. So yeah, I totally agree. They are seen as the bad guys, but they do their best within the system that we operate. And if they don't play by the rules, they have no company. So it is a balance.
Have you seen in any other area where consumers have changed the business?
Deep sigh.
Yeah, I was trying to think of like good examples before. Now we talked about the kind of recycling textiles. I don't know if I have a good example for that, but I think if you look at what I think is a great success story at the moment is Sellpy, which is this secondhand, essentially consignment store, consignment platform, which I think H&M is now a big shareholder in, if not the main owner.
They own it.
Yeah, and they've reported, I think this quarter, massive year-on-year profits, H&M. And one of the reasons that is attributed to that is this kind of secondhand website, Sellpy.
Yeah, I heard something about they would have like negative profit without Sellpy.
50 or 60%
Really?
growth on last year. It's huge. So I think there you can see that what they've done is make secondhand shopping really straightforward for customers. They collect the old clothes for resale in a really simple, straightforward way. They sort them, they take the photos, they sell, deliver, do all of that stuff. And as a consumer, if you sell your clothes, you get obviously a much smaller percentage than you would do if you sold them yourself. But you don't have to deal with any of those stupid people ringing you and asking, all the silly questions. So all of that.
So basically, if you make it really, really, really easy,
exactly,
then it can work.
And when you buy from them, it looks like you're buying from any kind of website. You can filter, you can sort by sizes, you can search in a really nice way. They deliver with all the kind of delivery options that you would have if you were buying from Boost or someone, and you can return the stuff that doesn't work. And I think that's a really good example of how whether that's consumer demand, I don't know, or whether
Was
this
it
is kind of
consumer built from the beginning?
No,
like
I
a
don't think
group, or
so.
was it a?
It's
It was.
producers.
I think it was H&M. Wasn't they the one that started it?
I'm not
Like,
sure. I can't say for sure.
Ah,
But
I'm
I
not
just
gonna
think
promise
that
it.
they've done a really good job with
Yeah.
making this seamless for the consumer, making a sustainable choice as easy as making an unsustainable choice, essentially. And I think that is a really fantastic job.
Definitely, I love it. I use
You
it.
use it?
I use it.
Mm.
Yeah,
I think
don't
several
feel
of my colleagues also have used.
Yeah.
I'm not shopping enough, apparently.
I don't shop there much. I
Uh-huh.
sell there. I
Nice.
shop for the
Oh.
kids there.
That's smart.
But yeah, it's easy. I wouldn't sell it by myself, and I would give it to charity. And this is
Yeah. But I think that's a great example of how, if you make it straightforward for consumers, and if consumers understand how it works and what they need to do, then
and they can
will
make
do
a
it.
profit in this case.
Yeah, exactly. It's
That
a win-win,
is-
I think.
Are things like blockets in general, are those consumer-driven alternatives that have worked in the same way, though not as easy as Selfie say?
Yeah, I think so. And
Yeah.
and Blocket and Facebook Marketplace, I think, also work really well. Maybe just not quite as good for when we talk about textiles or fashion, because I think those are small ticket items. If you're selling or buying furniture and things like that, those platforms are much more worthwhile. You spend a little bit more time, you have more energy to put on those.
And are these things
purchases.
getting bigger by the year as well?
I think so. Still. And I mean, if you see to the reuse market, every other scheme is just super small compared to Facebook Marketplace, Selfie, whatever. They're huge drivers.
How long has Selfie been around? About?
Ooh, 5 years or
something
something.
like 5 years. Yeah, I would guess. Although don't quote me.
Yeah, no. It felt like 5 years.
Yeah, you're seeing a lot of, I think, other these kind of platforms entering the market now as well. You have Vinted starting to show up in Sweden, and yeah, so I think this is a really positive development. And yeah, like I said in the beginning, I'm kind of interested in the non-rational reasons why we consume what we do. And it'd be nice to think that we consume sustainably for only rational reasons, like we care about the planet. But there's also a lot of irrational stuff going on there as well, right? Saying that I will only buy secondhand and we were wearing, there's some status involved there, right? Yeah, that's part of our identity. It's something we communicate about ourselves and feel proud of. So I think the more that this becomes something to be proud of, and we build up kind of status in making good sustainable choices as well, I think the better. That's only a good thing.
So basically, if we bundle it together, you get a sense of identity. You got to make it easy, and well, the price is an issue as well, of course.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you will only have the hardcore or the rich.
Yeah.
Hardcore interested, like clothies, or whatever they call, and rich people who can use it.
I mean, especially now when the interests are high, the economy is going on the low. Secondhand is usually rising, and usually it's better for the climate. We buy less for now.
Yeah, so the signs are good.
Yeah. Temporarily good, at least.
So forecast for the near future, Karis.
Forecast for the near future.
Pick out your crystal ball and tell us how's this going to save us all.
Yeah, this is going to be recorded, right? So you're going to come back in 5 years and say you were totally wrong. I mean, I think the interest in secondhand and recycled textiles really is growing. I think that's a positive thing. I think we see more players enter the market in the secondhand sphere, which is great. And I see that hopefully with a change of government in a few years, if we're lucky, we see more focus on environmental issues and more work with these EU regulations that makes this just work better on the production side.
I'm really looking forward to those EU documents coming out now and just knowing what's happening so we can adjust to that. So right now we're still up in the air, and I hope in the near future we will land and actually start working actively, like finding new collection solutions. I also see a lot of new technologies for recycling popping up. There's a lot of new startups, especially on the polyester side, which is not that mature, that I think will help a lot, both to get more recycled feedstock to use, but also like develop the market. I mean, if we now start collecting like a lot of textiles, but we don't know what to do with them, the prices will plummet, and then it will be even harder to work here. So there's a lot of chain reactions going on, but I think I'm positive, mostly. But it is complex and hard to navigate sometimes, yeah.
And what kind of decisions or what kind of push would you like to see from our politicians here in Sweden?
Right now, just a decision. How do
Oh,
you
yeah.
want it by 2025? Who's
And
going to collect? Who will own?
Will be the presidents of the board there in the EU negotiations going on right now, I guess.
Yeah.
So hopefully we have an extra influence in.
Yeah. I've heard that they don't want to. That's why they are being slow now. They're waiting for that before they come with any decision.
We tried to get in contact with our politicians in the area,
Yeah.
but they were very, very restrictive with any words right now because
Yeah.
they don't want to. Well, don't want to spoil the negotiations in any way.
But they're not going to be implementing it in like real life. We're going to have to buy containers, set up collection schemes. That takes time. We need time. Yeah.
So basically, I think we have a good picture of where we are and what's coming up ahead. And I'd like to thank you very much for coming here and talking about recyclable textiles with us. And I'd like to give you each a little present from us here at Sysav.
Oh, thank you.
Those carries. They're not
Thank you so
identical.
much.
Oh, very exciting. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for joining us and watching, and be sure to check us out in the future as well. We'll be doing more of these, and the old episodes are also up on our website. Thank you very much for coming.